All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 5:31 p.m. on this Monday, December 7th, 2020. I'm going to make a statement. This meeting is being recorded by the Charter Review Committee. Any other persons present are doing the same. You must notify the chairperson at this time. Anybody else recording the meeting? Okay. Go through the roll call. I'm more conservative than others, so I'd like you to say yes when I announce your name. Councilor Gilmore.
Yes.
Councilor Forgy.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Wheeler.
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
David Singer. Yes. Woods not here yet, but I'll note when he comes to the meeting. Okay. I don't know if you received today, like everyone else, I wish I was more organized, but I did realize that I had promised to get to the minutes of the meeting of the 9th, I think it was the 9th, yeah, and amend them. If you received them, you want to just look at them for a minute and see if somebody would make a motion to approve the minutes as amended, or if you feel you need to make other amendments. But I just felt that what I did from my own notes, made the minutes more clear. Hopefully I didn't exaggerate or miss.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, let's go through the roll, indicate by saying aye. Councilor Gilmore?
Aye.
Councilor Forgy?
Aye.
Councilor Wheeler?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
David? Aye, and Alan is not here yet. Okay, thank you. You also received in the packet the minutes from the last meeting, which I didn't have any issue with. Whether can I hear a motion, and then we can talk about whether people wanted to make any changes to that.
So moved.
Thank you.
Gilmore.
Who's second?
Second, Forgy.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right. Hearing none, all in favor. I'll go through the list. Councilor Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilor Forgy.
Aye.
Councilor Wheeler.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
David. Aye. Alan still not here yet. Okay. Thank you. Good. Moving right along. My notes indicate that we stopped with the esteemed former mayor and now current councilor Chris Forgy helping walk us through section 6. Isn't she regretting that she got that section to talk about? I think we were on the Public Safety Commission and we had talked about Eric, and I'm only saying this as a reminder, not as an indication of anything else or judgment, that Alan and Aaron were going to discuss some language that might be helpful in creating a call for diversity on the commission, and that was where and Sheila, I'm sorry, as well, and that's where we stopped. So we could remain on that section, but actually before we do that, I know the mayor hasn't been able to be at all. I want to recognize that Alan Woods is here now at 5:35. Welcome, Alan. The mayor has not been at several of our last meetings, but I know the charter review is important to her. And so her being here and knowing that she may have to leave before the meeting is over, is there anything you'd like to say or add or import upon us?
Well, yes, a couple of things. Just want to reiterate again and thank every one of you for doing this long, hard work. And I had planned to be more present at these meetings, but there's so many meetings. So just want to say thank you to all of you and happy holidays in case I don't make it back for whenever the next one is. And coincidentally, as they say, my things that I wanted to bring forward to you are related to section 6. So as we as we go through our daily days as mayor, certain things crop up. And I've been trying to make a running list of the potential changes that I might like to see, or at least to have you give you guys to think about. And I made a list and then I lost it, which is not a lot of surprising. You know, I make lists and they go away. But I of specific interest are some items on section 6, and I will try to retrieve the other list at some point in the future, and if nothing else, email it to you. But so some potential changes to section 6, and since you guys have been discussing section 6, you may have already thought of these, but one in particular that's important because it came up very recently is a plan to change section 6, 7 powers and duties. And I know you're going to ask me what that is, and my notes did not tell me, so I'm going to go there. That is planning and construction of municipal buildings and other facilities.
Yeah.
And it's not a big change, it's just a small language change. And I can certainly put them in an email to you. Oh, where is it? Oh, just there's nothing major about it per se under powers and duties. I just want to make it clear in the very last paragraph that begins, whenever any construction work on any municipal building or other facility is authorized, the Planning and Construction Committee shall be responsible for advising the mayor on. So that advising the mayor on piece is very important, really, at the end of the day, for future mayors or mayors who have never served on the planning board. For all work in connection with the project, including site planning, surveying, engineering, those are all duties of the planning board and should not be interfered with, frankly, by the Planning and Construction Committee, which is an advisory committee to the mayor. So I do not, as a mayor, and I'm sure no future mayor, would mind being advised on that, but it is the purview, the exclusive purview under the law of the planning board when they are the permit granting authority, whether it's a special permit granting authority or a regular one. So just trying to make that one clear.
Excuse me, Mayor, just for clarification.
I
know
will
you
write it down and send it, but
shall be responsible for advising the mayor on all work. Is that how you think
Yeah.
it should read? Okay, thank
yeah.
you.
And this will be good news for some. There's a possibility of a new section 6, and I can't begin to tell you that I'm prepared to present you with language tonight, but a new section under 6 that might be, and I do have to give this a little bit more thought, task force on housing, the mayor's task force on housing, or something like that, task force on affordable housing. So just something to think
Affordable
about.
or housing? Affordable?
I'm saying I'm
Okay,
not
all right,
prepared tonight to give you the full details. So it may just be simply housing, because then that covers a whole broad range of housing issues that we do face in the city. And I did promise long ago, it feels like long ago anyway, to create such a commission, whether it be codified in the, I hadn't thought about it at the time, but whether it be codified in the charter or in some other way. That is something that I had hoped to do by the end of this year, although that seems to be creeping up on us. So it'll be something I'll do in the first part of the next year. But I'll try to make a decision, and if any of you want to weigh in on that, I'm happy to hear what you have to say. it's similar to the task force on domestic violence, which meets regularly and has done a lot of good work. So let's stick a pin in that, and I will try to make a decision as to whether it's something that I would recommend or have you recommend as being part of the charter or not. And the third thing is I'm wondering if, and Chris may have, Counselor Forgy may have some insight into this because it may have been created under her or it may have been Mayor Martin. But I'm wondering now if the Department of Central Maintenance even needs to be in Section 6 because they have been taken over by, well, not literally taken over, it was by mutual agreement, become part of the DPW. So they, at one point, they were a separate entity, but they are no longer what I would call a separate entity that needs to be in the charter. And let me turn the page, but I think that's it. That is it.
Okay, Erin, you had a question of the mayor?
What do you consider the advantage or disadvantage to codifying task forces in the charter? And do you feel you have the ability to create task forces outside of the charter in the interim between a 10-year review?
Well, actually, Councilor Forgy, as former mayor, will be a good person to also help us answer that question since she created, if I'm not mistaken, the first task force that is in the charter. I don't know that I have a strong feeling one way or the other. If it's in the charter, it seems like something that not necessarily in perpetuity, but lasts longer than a hot minute, and has a little more, potentially a little more gravitas. And I guess then becomes the philosophical question of, is this where you do that sort of thing in the charter or is it in the code? So that's one way of looking at it. I can create an advisory committee as the mayor. I think I have the charter mostly memorized, but maybe not. But I think I can do an advisory committee, which is the way I'd been thinking about that committee all along, without having to make it written in stone somewhere. So I need to, that's why I said I'm not necessarily prepared tonight to make the decision that it should go in there, but I would hope that by the time you need to put out your recommendations, and I know that's coming at some point in the very near future, I could make a decision and say not to worry about it. But as I said, if others have a different feeling, and I see the Councilor Forgy wants to speak as well on it, as does, it looks like, John Lunt. See, I'm watching the chat, David, while you turn around. So,
How do I expand the chat, by the way?
You just click on it.
Oh, shit. I'm sorry. That's a legal term.
In the record.
That's a legal term in a recorded meeting.
By the time we get there, it'll be 9 o'clock. All right.
Does that
Just
help,
click on it.
Aaron? Does that help? Okay.
No, but Chris wants to ask a question, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to explain that it was a task force, so it was organic to the office of the mayor. And after I left office, the council codified the language and put it into the charter. And I was very pleased because, number one, it's extremely important matter that sort of be codified in our charter to show our commitment to that. So that was their doing, and I was thrilled that they did that.
Thank you.
I
Sorry, I'm
think
trying,
John,
still fooling around. John, yes, please.
So now I'm going to prove to you that I'm the kind of guy whose wife gave him a book on grammar and language and liked it. That's how much of a geek I am. Task force is actually something that is put together to meet a specific need, and it is filled with experts. That's the definition of it. It's people who have certain expertise in a certain area. A committee is something that's generally set up by usually through charter or through ordinance. So what I would say is the mayor always has the authority to set up the task force. The council can take a task force and turn it into a committee, and that's perfectly within their rights. What I would say, Mayor, is if you want to create a task force on housing or affordable housing or whatever you want to do, you can certainly do that because you would be putting together a group of experts to solve a particular problem. I think what it means is that the task force on domestic violence probably ought to be the committee on domestic violence if it has been codified, or maybe a slightly better phrase than that. But there is a little bit of an important distinction on who gets to do what, and mayors get to put together task forces without them being codified into the charter. Whereas a task force that's codified into the charter isn't really a task force anymore, because you have interested people serving on it, but they don't necessarily meet the definition of the expertise put together for a task force. And then I can also explain the subjunctive clause to anybody who would like to hear about it.
but can you do it in Spanish? I'll jump in on behalf of former Mayor Forgy and myself. That committee is pretty well full of experts.
Okay.
It's headed by oh geez, help me with her name.
Mary Coachella.
Thank you. From the district attorney's office, and that is her world. And she has assembled a very fine team of people. So in that particular case, I'm going to say they are definitely the experts on this matter. So that's all I
don't mean to disparage anybody on
No,
the
I know
committee.
you didn't. I know you didn't. I
Codified
wasn't.
in the charter, it's not a task force anymore. It's a committee.
Yeah. Exactly. So I just wasn't aware I wasn't sure if you were aware who is on that committee.
John, can I just
It's always
ask?
good to bank on my being ignorant of certain facts. You're never going to go too far wrong with that.
Yeah.
John,
Yes.
excuse me. Based on your definition, the section 6.2-24 comports with your definition, and yet it's in the charter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just a language. I'm sure the language was just brought over. I don't have any trouble with it. I'm actually not.
Okay. All right. So it's something that it's a good point to. Okay. Good. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? I have some questions of the mayor. We, just by the nature of how things go in Greenfield, I was someplace and I was, I ran into the head of the recreation department, and she said that she had provided you or expected to some for the charter committee, but I have not seen anything.
Nor have I that I'm aware of. I will double check my email and making a note right now. Something from Christie. I have not seen it. If I can find it before I leave the meeting tonight, I'll let you know. If not, I will remind her.
Yes, Chris. Thank you.
I have seen it because I sit on appointments and ordinances. So I have seen the email that has come through. And it seems to me, I don't want to misspeak, but it seems to me that it rises to the level of ordinance and not charter change. So you may want to Mayor, you may want to just double check on that, but I don't know as if there's any charter change suggestions.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I know that, yeah, when we put out, here's what could have happened, David. When Danny put out the call, it was a call, and it may have been all in the same email to department heads. It was a call to consider whether there was anything in the charter that affected their departments that they felt needed some language adjustments. So that was one thing. But then at the same time, or very shortly thereafter, I think at the instigation of Dan from Appointments and Ordinances, Councillor Gwynn, that she put out, and if there, go through the code with a fine tooth comb and see if there's anything in there that needs to be updated, changed, added, etc. So it could be that, you know, the two were commingled. As Chris says, it may have been that Trustee thought that what she was submitting was something for the charter when in fact it was for the code.
So there is in fact a Board of Recreation Commission.
There is,
Yes.
that much is true.
And what is their relationship to the Recreation Department? So they're just an advisory committee to you, Mayor, and they tell you, is it a functioning committee that
Yeah.
that
Highly-
does it
It's
work
highly
hand in hand?
function- Yeah, sorry.
No, is it work hand in hand with the Recreation Department?
Absolutely, it
All
does,
right.
and they are involved in many things, such as helping out when they do wonderful things like the Halloween thing that we did, as well as fundraising, as well as advising her on their thoughts apropos this year of opening up parks and when, and leagues if we have any. They're different things. They're a vital part of how the recreation department functions.
All right, well then, that's great. So Chris, if you could just take a look through what you received on the council level, and
Sure.
if there's anything that you think, you know, based on our now continuously discussing the distinctions. No, seriously, I think everybody here gets it. So if you think there's something to be said for discussion, something new that should be entered, or, you know, or even go back to the source and say, is this something you want codified in the charter because you feel that this gives you a firm, but if the ordinance is really the place where all that is taken care of, then we can let that go. I just want to make sure she was heard. Okay, that sounds like she was. I don't have any more questions. Anybody else have any more questions for the mayor? Okay, I mean, certainly, Mayor, you can stay on this and participate.
I'll hang out for a little while longer, but I'll go on mute and let you guys do.
Oh, I wanted to respond to the central maintenance piece. Bring you into the loop. So I think, Mayor, I had this discussion with you. I'm repeating myself for this group. I'll try to be so back in the day when we were on the school committee, you and I, there were always concerns about the fact that I think it's chapter 70 is the school money, right?
It is one of them. Yeah.
All right. So that the chapter 70 money had maintenance built into it, and the schools were, I'm going to tell you what my understanding of the law is. It has maintenance built into it because the school committee controls the school buildings. So that money was not being used for maintenance. It was being used for education. And so a task force was created, of which I was a part. And as the charter was changing, we came up with, we went over to North Andover, which had done a remarkable thing of combining their resources. There was a lot of feuding in the old government between the school side and the town side. I hope that's not there now. And Andover, being a town, was able to have the school committee vote to let its maintenance money out of its budget and go to the city side, so long as the school committee was represented in the place where the decisions were made to deal with maintenance of big buildings. And that gave the city more money so that there'd be a trade-off. When there was an emergency for the town hall to be repaired, that could happen in year 1. When there was an emergency in the school to be repaired, that might happen in year 3. And it also created a system of mutuality. There was a representative from the school side on the superintendent and the mayor, or the superintendent and the town administrator had to work hand in hand on this. And that was all in a hypothetical place when the charter was created. And so the charter said, go to, whatever that group recommends, go to that. I don't remember in 2010 if the central maintenance had been created or not. I don't think under Mayor Forgy she was able to get that far, but I know that
it was done under Bill, actually not as recently as last year, right before I took office.
Okay. So the question is, before we do away with this, is to go back and see if the school, if the word central maintenance committee means in this charter a combining of the Chapter 70 monies with the town side monies in a pool of money controlled by both the school and town side to deal with maintenance of both city side and school side property. That's what it was meant to do. You're calling this thing in the Department of Public Works central maintenance. I don't know if they line up. I don't know if the school, John didn't remember, Mayor Forgy didn't remember specifically, if the school committee ever voted to, there were actually forms of votes that were given to us about how the school committee could vote to move that money along. And so I'm just wondering if it behooves us to kind of find out how Bill Martin went from the idea to the name and how that's played out.
Okay, I can help a little bit. I just want to make sure that you understand that section 6.6 on page 25 of your charter, all it says is Department of Central Maintenance. There shall be a Department of Central Maintenance consistent with the Central Maintenance Committee's, I have no idea what that was, recommendations as provided by ordinance. I'm guessing that's the task force / committee that you're talking about.
Absolutely correct.
So, so that's all well and good. That is the piece that I am suggesting not necessarily needs to be in there, because by a vote of the council, Otis, help me out, or Sheila, or the central maintenance, if I'm not mistaken, the central maintenance department was combined in the DPW, if not last year, at the very beginning of this year, but I think it was last year. But very much towards the end. So it is you are correct. There is a central maintenance department, and they do help the schools, and they help the rest of the city as well. So they do things that DPW and their laborers and their people do not do. And they relate to, answering calls about the building. The custodians, certainly for the city hall, are under central maintenance, not DPW per se. And they work very closely with Alan Schmidt at I think that's his name, Alan's his first name, at the school department for whenever they need assistance. Don't confuse, which you may have been doing, but I'm not going to presume to say that. Don't confuse this section 6.6 Department of Central Maintenance with the Planning and Construction Committee, and more importantly, the Capital Improvements Committee. Which is where that Chapter 7, not necessarily Chapter 70 money, but that is where the schools have their opportunity to say, these are the things that are not being maintained properly or have had deferred maintenance or need addressing. And they present, and we're doing that right this very minute. Not this minute, but today. The meeting had to be canceled, but the schools get an opportunity to present to the capital improvements group their recommendations for their capital expenditures. Now, granted, those are over $25,000, I think is the threshold. So they're bigger projects, painting windowsills, or fixing windowsills, different, paving and so forth. So that's how that gets done. But the central maintenance is the day-to-day, and they are now under the DPW. And that's my only reason for suggesting that when you were considering this, there may have been a reason for them to be in the charter. And we have actually, I was pleased to see, made great strides in because we were on the school committee together and we did have a problem with that. But I won't say we no longer have a problem, but they work very closely and everybody kind of knows their lanes. And if Alan needs George or vice versa, they do communicate and things do get done.
All right, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think I think I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure you understand what I'm saying. I think there's a legal issue here that the department, the fact that this central maintenance committee is buried in the Department of Public Works and not, even though you have a system of what you're doing, and I'm sure the system is created from our central maintenance, by burying it in the Department of Public Works, it kind of gets lost. There should be an agreement or something out there that says that the school side has a right to participate in that money. And I don't care if you put it in the Department of Public Works under those circumstances, but there never was an agreement as far as I know. But by keeping it separate, I felt comfortable that at least there was a separate pile of money and everybody knew it was called central maintenance. Now, if it's buried in the now that if it's being buried in the DPW, I think I'm asking that we find out a little bit more about what's going on, because generally speaking, it's under the control of the executive branch, and it doesn't have any agreement that shows that the school side has received its benefit, which is participation on a contractual basis. It may receive it on a informal basis, but it needs, or a formal basis that's kind of what people are used to, but there needs to be something codified. And this is what we were going to codify in the charter. If you want to codify it in an ordinance, that's fine, but it has to be codified.
Okay, so just so you know, Chapter 70 money by law comes to the city. It does not go to the schools. And the city, you probably remember this, or you may not. The city disperses it in many ways, not the least of which is probably maintenance of buildings. But it also goes to retirement benefits, workers' compensation benefits, healthcare benefits, and so forth.
I'm only talking about that portion that's attributed to maintenance.
Yeah.
Has to be given to the school side.
Yeah.
Without their approval, unless they allow it to go to the city side. Yes.
Well, we got 3 chairs of school committees here, so we do that, and we don't generally tell them what to do with it. We just give it to them.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead. Yes, John.
So first, I want to start with a question. Is there, in fact, a central maintenance committee right now? I don't believe there is. I don't think one has been seated for years, at least 5 years. But I started working for the city in 2015, and there wasn't one then. So whether or not it was created by ordinance, I haven't had time. I've been trying to go through the ordinances, so I didn't get to that. So first of all, I'm not even sure if there is a central maintenance committee, and I don't believe there has been one for a while. Generally speaking, my impression was closer to the mayor's, and that the money was blocked over to the school department, and then janitors were line item in the school budgets, and that was how it was taken care of. It was all part of Chapter 70. I don't remember, David, having any specific votes to move that money. It just said, it was just, here's what the Chapter 70 money is. Some of that went to janitorial services and things that were done in conjunction with then the central maintenance department. But you may well be right, but I don't think there's any current mechanism in place to vote that, nor is there a committee to oversee it.
Otis.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that I don't believe council was aware of a lot of the details. Certainly not the fact that when we approved the sort of absorption of central maintenance into the DPW, I don't think we were aware that that was a conflict with the charter. And I certainly wasn't aware of this background around the Chapter 70 allocation. So I think there's some details here, and I mean, the fact that it's a conflict with the charter, shouldn't just be sort of brushed aside. I hear a lot of this background that David, you're bringing up, and I feel like we should give it the attention it deserves.
I think, Mayor, the reason you feel content about it is because in practice, what's happening is what the design of the Central Maintenance Committee was, that the spirit of it is being implemented. But there's no legal mechanism for it in our charter besides this reminder from 18 years ago that something had to be done, or should have been. It was recommended that something be done because the central. So here was an idea. The Mayor Martin or Mayor Forgy may have seen the idea, but she had other things to do. Mayor Martin saw the idea. He said, "Aha, we can just pool this money. Let's do it." Boom, he did it, and he created something called, the charter says central maintenance. Let's do central maintenance, and he did it. And then it was like, okay, but of course the schools have to participate. So however that was happening before happened, and now it's been moved into DPW, and it sounds like the school still participates, which is fine. But I'm just telling you that our duty is not the same as if you want to be, if others want to be content with it, that's fine with me. But from the charter point of view, or from the charter ordinance point of view, I know from my work that there's money that comes in through 70 that by law is supposed to roll back into the school budget, and it can only be released by the school committee to the town to use under their direction. And it seems like all of that is taking place, but I'm asking, where is the authority? Where were the meetings? Where were the approvals that allowed for this system to be set up in a way that protects, I would think, the school side, especially. It sounds like we don't know the answer.
Just to let you know, there is a footnote on your 6-6 that does allude to Chapter 99 Maintenance Department of the Code of the City of Greenfield. Now, I did not go read that, but it's in the charter and it does give you the reference in the code. So again, it may be as simple as a code change. Just so you know, this is not a hill I'm dying on. It is just, I got other hills.
Yeah, but it's
kill me, but this is not one of them.
I spent a year and a half doing this.
Yeah.
And it was implemented without going back and looping back to the people who had done the good work to figure it out.
Yeah, so it's just me making a suggestion is all to the committee to consider it and investigate and see what you feel.
Yeah, well, that's what we're doing.
Okay.
I just want to find out how it all went down and then codify it. And it may come out of the charter at the end of the day. Okay. Anything else for the mayor? All right, Chris, where do you think we were on the?
Sorry, Chris.
We were on. I think we were talking still about. I'm going in the wrong direction. The public safety, right?
Yes, that's where we left off, but we were toward the end of that. According to the notes that I have at this point, we were really having our discussion around an independent assessment board of some sort. And I don't know if that would be another article under 6. This would be for police and fire complaints.
I think we left that with, I'll speak from my own memory, that we talked about the importance of that, of opening up our system to responding to severe complaints, that it was a difficult thing to do, that it would need more of a study, which disappointed some of the members of the committee that, it seemed to always study things. And so what we thought might be a good result would be to put language in the charter itself that required the mayor to provide a diversity on the Public Safety Commission. And whether it was lawful or not, because of the issues involved with that, it could give, it certainly would be a political statement, and it would be a community statement about how we'd like to see the Public Safety Commission be set up. And, there were 3 people who volunteered to write something about that. I'm only saying that you agree, not that your homework's due today. And that I thought that was a really good approach, and that the other piece would be more of a recommendation to the council that, something needs to happen, but that, because we had a good half-hour discussion about it, and I thought that it was a good discussion, but it left us with a lot of, I know John gave a strong opinion about, how hard it would be to do that. Alan felt very strongly about the fact that something should be done, and I think at the end we can recommend that something be done, but it may be more time than our group can give to it, except for this idea of adding language into the what's now in the charter. And that's how I remember leaving it. Before we make it, you want to check with yeah, sure. I didn't know anything about that, so that'd be good. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. If you could, all right.
Okay, so I did have a couple of other things that I wanted to point out to committee members on this.
On the same provision.
I'm sorry, no, these were 2. This would be going back to, oh my goodness, let's see, it would be section 4. It would be down at the bottom, 1. The commission shall meet on a regular basis, is the language.
Wait, I'm sorry. Are we still in the Public Safety Commission section?
We are, yeah.
All right, well,
yeah.
There is, you mean 4 of F?
No, F, well.
I don't see a 4.
You mean 1 of
No,
F?
it's not 4, it's 1. It's 1. After F, it's 1. Okay? So it says the commission shall meet on a regular basis. I'm wondering if we don't want to, for a PR piece, just make sure that Public Safety Commission meets at least once a month, and that perhaps, I mean, this might be more procedural, but if we put in once a month, the procedural can move to public comment to public safety, which you don't actually have to have all the time. That's the committee's choice. But if we put language in that says at least once a month, that might give another opportunity for citizens to approach public safety if there's an issue that they have on their mind. I don't know how other people feel about that.
You just raise your hand if you want to. I like the idea of causing them to meet regularly for it would be the beginning of moving into the places that we're looking to move into. Yes, Otis.
They may not be meeting regularly because of COVID or because of all of the fire station building committee meetings, which some of their members are on, but they do, I mean, meet regularly, don't they? So I guess my question is just, and this comes back to a lot of things in the charter of whether we need to, have the governor sign a piece of paper for something that's has been practiced. It's not an argument against it, but I guess I'm not quite convinced yet.
Mhm.
The only reason it could say on a regular basis and at least once a month, something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the charter. I mean, the council's meeting, for example, is more an internal meeting calendar, right? It's not. I don't think the charter says we have to meet once a month. I'll have to look at it, but maybe
It does. Well, at least I actually don't know if it's charter or code, but it's in one or the other.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. All right, that's fine. Can we leave it at that? Chris, is that all right to just leave it as something
Yeah,
that?
that's fine. That's just a suggestion.
Okay. Anything else in 6?
Could I?
Oh, Mayor, I'm sorry. Did you want to?
Well, no, I want Chris to finish it with 6, and then I want to tack on to the end of it.
Okay.
Public safety 6. I mean,
It's 6-11.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the last item, but I think we've solved that right in the beginning, which was the definition of a special municipal employee. So I think we already did that. So that would be it for that stanza.
Well, just to add to that, did everybody get? There was Kathy or Tammy sent us a definition in the state law. Did everybody get that? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's state law. So that the point I think was that it's a term of art that is codified in the state law. So that's how you understand what it means. It's not just a set of words that were just made up because there's a special employee. It's a term of art under state law. Okay.
Library. Oh, if the mayor.
Chris, are you done with 6-11?
I am.
All right. Sounds like Mayor Gardner would like to add something.
well, I don't need to add. I just wanted to comment. I am certainly myself, I can't speak for future mayors, that I am more than willing to attempt to address adversity on that committee. I will tell you that my experience since taking office in, since taking office in January is that is very difficult. And I don't know if you want to put it in what I'm calling codified, in a charter or a code or something, for the simple reason that you can, use a Texas phrase here, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. We held open 2 positions on the Human Rights Commission for a long time, 1 or 2, I forget, I did, in hopes that, and we made several calls, not specifying diversity because there are the legal constraints around that, but in hopes that someone particularly in the moment, because it was during June and July, would step up and be on the HRC. Similarly, I did a similar thing for the Public Safety Committee, and we simply didn't have anybody come. So that may mean that we need to be more proactive out of the mayor's office in doing that in some way, or we need to solicit all voices to, solicit help in finding other members. There's other ways we could handle it. Now, if you want to put it in there as insurance, so to speak, that future mayors will adhere to that, then I'm just cautioning you that you don't want to hamper the overall makeup of the committee just because somebody will not step up to the plate to fulfill that. So, because those people, the Public Safety Commission is important and it needs to have its full complement of members, if at all possible. So you don't, that's all I'm saying. It's just a caution. It's not, I have, as I say, a commitment to doing that in all committees. It's interesting, a couple of people of color who suggested, wrote to me and said they wanted to be on committees during that interim. I did not want to be on either of those committees. It wasn't like I could say, well, I don't want to put you on the rec commission because, well, I need you on the X commission. I wasn't going to do that because these people come forward because they want to be where they want to be.
Thank you. Otis?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Mayor. For background for the conversation, for what my perspective is that diversity means a lot more than just people of color, and you know, this body that we're talking about, and we're not impugning any of the members, is all males over the age, white males over the age of 50, and so we want also, you know, a diversity of backgrounds. And so I think that was the conversation. You know, we talked about how to do that, and I think we don't want to, you know, put it in writing exactly, but we do want to talk about, well, this is a goal and how do we get there? And for me, we probably need to raise the number of members. That seems likely to me in order to, but yeah, that's all.
Yeah,
That suggestion was actually brought to me by a public safety committee member to raise the number of members, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, I would agree with Otis that it was, you know, if the standard just to put out a simple statement would be to make every effort, and we know that you will make every effort, then you're complying, and if you cannot, if people are not available, then you've made every effort. But there could be another mayor who makes no effort. And then without it being codified, there's no strength. There's nothing there to cause that elected official to make every effort. And so I think that's the reason for it. I don't think it has to do with you. It's obvious that it doesn't. And but I think what Otis and others were talking about was just what Otis said before. And I think it's important. And so if there's language in there, and of course, we're all going to look at it, so we'd certainly love your input in it, Mayor. But I think if there's language in there that's at least a sentence or a part of a sentence that makes a description, and it make every reasonable effort or whatever, and that's just going to have to be determined later what that means. But clearly, there's something in there. I think the committee is pretty much 100% wanting something like that to happen. So I think you'll see a strong recommendation of that,
Good.
and then we'll wait for the, you know, our esteemed to put something in writing. I think it's, but anyway, so just so you know, and I think it's a good thing. I think it dovetails with what you're saying because you would do it anyway, but I think it's a good thing. So thank you.
So I'm gonna check out now because that last call was from Chief Stray, and so I probably ought to see what he wants.
Okay.
So good luck, guys. Thank you
Mayor.
again
Thanks for joining us.
all of your work. It's a fine committee, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Are we done with, we're done with 611, right, Chris?
Yeah, on to 612, which is library trustee.
Yeah, I think, wasn't there a suggestion about, didn't the library folks make a suggestion to us, which I added to the, it was long ago, right? I added it to the stuff.
It was, and I was going to say I couldn't find that original.
I have it.
Okay, and
it's exhibit on. I have this. This is my Bible.
Okay. Yeah,
Not to say that I need the
couldn't
other
even
Bible.
find your exhibit online today, so I have to go back.
Let's see. Yeah, there's just some language that she suggested. Why? I mean, if we can go over it.
I don't have the language.
Okay, I have it in front of me. So may I help you?
Yes, you may. Thank you.
Recommendations to change the text in 612D2 to say to make all reasonable rules and regulations for the operation and management of the library in consultation with the mayor and the library trustees. That was the first recommendation. And the second recommendation was to change, that's 2E, to say responsibility for the ordinary, oh, here we go.
Yep.
Or responsibility for the ordinary maintenance of library buildings and grounds has been transferred to a city central maintenance department by ordinance adopted by city council. So just to continue my digression, that means the city side money has been put into that place for the benefit of the library. Has nothing to do with the schools, any of the things I was talking about. It just means that that's where the town side wants that money to go. Okay, so just to distinguish it. I don't, but let's look at this to say responsibility. Is there oh, I see. Yeah, so that happened already. But I think the word central maintenance, again, I think that the central maintenance department's gumming up the works. So that's where the language would be changed. You've already created an ordinance. It could even say the responsibility for the ordinary maintenance of libraries and buildings will be by ordinance, if you want. I mean, it doesn't have to say anything more.
David, can I comment on 2?
On the first thing I said?
Yes, where it says in consultation with the mayor and library trustees.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. You just have to listen to your phone call.
I'm sorry. There's no way I can shut it off. I do apologize. My comment was, is that a bit redundant? Because the mayor does appoint the library trustees, and the authority of the mayor, it's a strong mayor. So I'm questioning whether that language is even needed, because if you put it in there, it kind of requires the mayor to get the permission of the library trustees, which the mayor appoints. So I'm trying to work out the internal structure of who gets the final say in what, and this is a strong mayoral government.
Kind of slipping that in there, huh? Slip that little phrase in
I
there.
had to do that strong mayoral government piece.
Couldn't get past you. Well, it was their suggestion, so it's our. I know what you're saying, though. It's the library trustees work at the mayor is in charge.
Yes.
So I agree. Does anybody else have anything to say on that? Any people that are good with language? We know there besides me. Do you think it's redundant, or do you think it's a way of slipping in the ability of the trustees to say, wait a minute, you can't do that because we have to say yes?
It just says
Yeah.
consultation. It just says consultation with. To me, that doesn't say that the Board of Trustees has some sort of final approval, because this is what the director is doing. So it is as if, to me, it could be as simple as informing them. It just says in consultation. I don't think it's usurping any sort of power of the mayor.
It's interesting in labor law, which I'm not an expert in, but which I had a lot of experience in on the school committee, especially. These kind of provisions gave employees the right to be informed and included in decisions. Even if the employee group said do A and the employer did B, they couldn't do A without consultation with the employees. And so that it sounded like a labor provision. I'm saying that seriously, that it's a way for the trustees to argue that while the mayor has the final say, that final say can't happen without us being at least included and notified. That's what I think it means. I don't think it changes the power of the mayor to make the final decision. It's political, because it could be that the mayor just says, you know, I'm busy, I'm going to go, thank you for the advice, now I'm going to go do that. But you have to loop back into the library and say, by the way, what do you think of this? And the library could say, we don't like it, but so it isn't redundant. It's not redundant because it's a process. It's a process question. It's like, instead of going to the board of trustees, getting a recommendation and going with it, it sounds like they have to be included in the final decision, even if that decision is, this is what I'm going to do. Is that a fair reading of it, or am I? That's how I understand it. But maybe I'm giving it more credit than, maybe it's just redundant. You know, so maybe we should loop back to the trustees and find out what they're looking for. Is that?
Mhm. Sounds good.
And that will be your job, Chris,
Thank you.
because you were very much a part of that group for a very long time, as I know. You used to go before me when we went to the finance committee. Okay, we're giving you $1. Now the school committee, we want $1 million. Okay, so let's loop back and find out what that. So we're going to loop back on that. Okay, what's next? Zoning Board of Appeals.
Right.
I don't think.
I didn't have any suggestions on that. I don't know what anybody else thought.
I think I think there's a state law that gives the cities different options, and then I think this tells the state what option we chose, the numbers and that kind of thing. So I don't think that needs. But the Board of Assessors. Who would have thought that this provision of the charter would be so important?
I don't even know where to begin. And I think the first place to begin on this is with Section A. And there are some things that are not, that I don't have answers to, but I do have questions for. So Section A talks about 3 members of the Board of Assessors. 2 are elected, 1 is appointed by the mayor. And the mayor appoints for an indefinite term, says, and would act as chief assessor. Okay, so to my way of understanding all of this, there are regular meetings, and when there is action needed on a property or on setting a tax rate or whatever has to happen, they have to take a vote. One of the things that I'm not clear of is the person who's acting as the chief assessor. Does that mean that the chief assessor has to be certified in order to be able to vote? Or does that mean that anybody holding that position at this point can vote? So I don't know if this belongs in, it's unclear to me what chief assessor means. That's
Right. May I jump in before we move on?
Yeah.
Just because we just dealt with this, and this is not saying this is so. Let me preface the remark. I'm speaking from experience, but not expertise.
Okay.
So my experience was that we had an acting chief assessor whose title was acting chief assessor, because while she was appointed by the mayor as chief assessor, she was not certified. And my belief was that that did not stop her from voting. I hope that clarified something.
Yeah, but what are the qualifications, I think, is one of the questions that she had. Chris had, right?
There are state qualifications that I don't know specifically, but I believe they're in Mass General Law.
So does it need to be, is it, so even on a simple level, is there a need to beef up this provision so that, I mean, if the assessor's office at a minimum is flying below the radar screen created by the charter, is there a need to buttress the language in the charter to make sure that at least there's a certain ground level that we will function within? I know there's other concerns, and those concerns can be discussed. I'm not going to bring them up because I don't know that much about it, but I do think that seems to be less supervised than one would hope it would be, considering the important work that it does. So I don't know whether that means that it's flying under this, what says here in A, B, C, and D at a minimum, or if it's not, that you're saying to yourself, well, why is this person in the top position? What are the qualifications? And somebody says, well, read the charter. It just says, it has like a really vague set of words that talk about what to do. Why don't we strengthen those words so that at least, there's a ground, there's a ground level for what we're going to have going on there. And that might actually help promote a change in what's going on there to the extent. But I do know that underneath it all, we went from having people who worked within the town to going out and having a service do our assessments. And I don't know, I don't see that as being a charter provision necessarily.
Right.
But it might be something that, that you as a council can talk about by ordinance if you wish. But I think that might be an executive power because it played out as an executive power. All the people were let go and there was some disputes and but it seems like there's been chaos ever since to some degree. And so I don't know. I don't know enough but I'm asking the question, especially what Chris has brought up, is that because every other thing is pretty straightforward. It's A that really might need to have some language, right? Go ahead, Otis.
Well, my interpretation actually is that probably D is the key to everything here, because two of the assessors are elected positions, and generally they're unopposed and they're elected without a lot of, the public doesn't necessarily know their qualifications. And this is, I mean, many town clerks are elected in that way. It's not unusual. But that said, there are potential conflicts of interest that have been identified that this charter does not address. So, the people who run for Board of Assessors tend to have an interest in real estate, and that's natural. But I do wonder, as a counselor who's had to try to deal with this issue, whether the charter shouldn't look at those, shouldn't think about this question more closely.
So would that mean adding qualifications to, and not qualifications like you have to be good in real estate or you have to be good at this or that, but qualifications about where your interests may lie, so that, but I don't know. That you can't run for office if or something. Like we have it in the other part, excuse me, Chris, but we have it in the other parts of the charter where it says if people leave the town, they can't be employed by the town, for example, for a year after they work. So this is an incoming issue. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead. I just want to finish my thought. Otherwise I forget it.
So my frame of reference goes back a bit when we had an assessor, a chief assessor, an assistant assessor, office staff as well, which these I understand are either ordinance or procedural pieces. But the people making the decision makers were the chief assessor, and then there were two elected assessors from the community, neither one of whom, or which, or whatever the right word is at this point. Sorry, John, if I'm murdering the English language. um, neither one of them were interested in real estate. Now, the problem that I'm having, and just to pick up on what Otis said, is that there is conflict that is caused if you are acting as an agent of the town, representing the town's best interests, and if again you have business dealings which conflict with the business interests of the town. So the takeaway from when we were talking about how to get the right selection of members on a public safety commission, it's like you don't want to put language in that legislates. We want this so many of this, well, so many women, we want so many of men, we want so many white, we want so many of color, we want. You have to stay away from that language. But I'm starting to question if and anybody can run for an elected office. So the conundrum to me is, how can you say, if you have an interest that is going to conflict with the town's interests, don't run for the office? How can you say that?
You can.
You can't.
Why are assessors elected? Is that a common
I don't know, but maybe that's something we need to look at. Remember again that when and you know this, David, that when the charter was put together, it was basically taken from another, a compliment, whatever.
elementary?
Yeah, it was put together by a whole different pieces from different places. But because the town was thought to be hanging on to its tradition and its heritage, especially in government, there are a lot of things that transferred into this charter, like elected officials, because we used to have an elected city clerk, those types of things. Maybe this is one of those vestiges, and I'm not sure of what the law says, but maybe we should look into the appointment of assessors. And is that good? Is that not good? What's the advantage? What is the disadvantage? Again, if you are wanting people to choose their representatives to do the very best job in accurately reporting their taxes, if you allow the mayor to do that, then the mayor can appoint 3 people that are not necessarily of a different mind. So I don't have an answer, but I think that we really need to do some work on this as far as the charter is concerned, if not anything else but heavy duty research. So, and I apologize for not being the one to do that.
Hey, David, I've got a couple of comments and a couple of questions. Our charter, I believe, says that the mayor's not allowed to have another job outside of being the mayor. And I don't think that being an elected assessor is not a full-time job the way being the mayor is. But I think that we could put some language in saying, that the assessor should not, have any paid work that, something where we can get at that conflict of interest. I know I had a part-time job doing lobbying work. And when I decided to run for mayor last year, I had to resign from that job because of my former employer's code. They didn't want people running for office if they were going to be engaged in political work. They didn't want to get in trouble for it. So I think there are like a lot of different ways we can kind of do this that saying, oh, you can't be in real estate. Because I mean, there are some people who, if you're a real estate agent and you don't work in Greenfield, I would be okay, right? So if we can kind of get at that and just say, um, that they're not allowed to engage in these transactions, just like city councilors, we can't be appointed to positions in the city, to paid positions, for 2 years after we leave office. I mean, it can be done. I think we just have to put our heads together on it and figure out what's the best way to do it so that we don't look like we're trying to, exclude certain people who actually have really good professional experience from running for these positions. And, if we could get more people to run, I think that's, I think last year we didn't even have anyone running. And then, like, the day of the election, I heard that someone was running a write-in campaign. So, I mean, if we had more people running, I think we would run into this problem less often. But I don't think that's something that this group can solve.
Well, Erin just did some homework, and just so you know, and boy, Erin, if I knew this and I was still a lawyer, I don't know what you do during the day, but I would have you be my legal research giant. Like the law says that, so in our situation, we have 3. We have to at least have 1 elected, which I was actually thinking about as being the compromise, because you want to have, you can't have all the, you can't have all the foxes in the hen house. You got to have somebody in there. So you have somebody elected, that's 1, but the person who's elected may be outvoted, every time, which means that person can make a political statement about what's going on. At least they're in the room. When you have 2 people elected, I don't know what the assessor deals with. I don't know. So the assessor might be outvoted. The chief assessor might be, I don't know what you experienced, Chris, but the chief assessor might be outvoted by the elected officials. So I think we have to have 1 elected person. So it's either more assessors and do it so that there's a dilution of corruption, of potential corruption. And it sounds like what, I didn't check the statute, but assuming she's correct, we can have 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9 assessors. So you can have a combo. I mean, you have to pay people if you appoint, all these people have to be paid too, by the way, I think. And thank you, Erin. I don't understand that either, but go ahead, Alan.
I don't see the issue of either being elected or appointed being able to solve issues with conflict of interest. The issue would have to be written out, I believe, in the charter or whatever to solve it. But I don't believe the idea of making everyone appointed or everyone elected solves the possible problems related to that, to conflicts of interest.
I think my impression of the conflict of interest, if it really is the idea that somebody gets elected who then, through the process of the assessments, protects his or her group of people. So it's not a conflict like, oh, I own the property at 25 Park Avenue. I can't make the decision about how much the property is going to be valued at. That's a conflict of interest. The conflict of interest that people are throwing out sounds more like, I own these types of, maybe that's a conflict of interest. I own these types of properties and I shouldn't be involved in making the assessments for it, but that's more subtle. The corrupt place is, my friends own these types of properties. I don't even own them, but I'm going to make sure that their assessments are low because they're the ones who help me get elected every 3 or 4 years. And that, appointing could be the mayor appoints somebody who's also corrupt, who says, the mayor's corrupt and says, I want my people in there low. And so the corruption piece. So I'm not talking about maybe the corruption is something that you just have to vet it out and expose it. But it's the other idea, the more subtle corruption, the idea of, of not understanding what a conflict of interest means. So maybe you're right, Alan. Maybe part of the way to do it is to define some way, which has been talked about, what conflict of interest means. And when somebody can't, go ahead, John, I'm sorry, I know you've been patient.
No, I just have to fill out my SFI again this year. And that really does not capture the kind of corruption you're talking about. I'm not even sure it effectively captures, hey, my buddy owns these condominiums, so I want to make sure that's really for direct. I can't say assess my property at really low values. So I don't really think there's a mechanism in place to address what you're talking about. The SFI is really only for just overt corruption, right? Direct financial interest in what you're talking about. I don't
John,
think I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could you tell me what an SFI is?
Statement of financial intent, in some statement of financial something beginning with an I. And you fill it out to say that you have no conflicts, that you don't own any properties in a certain area, that you have no financial interests, that if you're on a board, you're not in a company that sells something to that board, or you recuse yourself in certain situations. But it's really sort of basic stuff. And what David's talking about is that sort of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of corruption that isn't really captured in, I believe, I don't know for sure, I don't think it's intended to be captured in that kind of a document. That's really just for straight conflicts of interest. But if you can't, I just think that language is going to be very tricky to say, because at some point you cross that line where it's such soft corruption that there frankly isn't a lot of difference between what's corruption and what's politics. So I think you can say that you can't have direct interest, but when you get to that next level of sort of the backroom deals, I would love to hear somebody suggest some good language, because I have never heard any that's sufficient.
Oh, how about before, who was looking to speak? Chris?
Mm-hmm.
Just I want to make something I was thinking about. The tax collector's office is kind of like the alter ego of the assessors. And one of the ways that I always assumed that corruption was stopped there was that, how many times has anybody called the tax collector and said, please, I was one day late, can't you give me a break? And I've overslept, whatever. Forget it. It's not, there's nothing, the tax collector is handcuffed, has to work this way. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how nice you are or otherwise. And there's a set of rules, that's how it has to go. Is there something, and I would put it, maybe the council can get involved, is there a systemic way to create a system within the assessor's office that they have to do their assessments based on certain formulaic or some method that takes all of this out of play? There's not a, that doesn't exist?
Yes, it does.
No, that's how it's done.
That is how it's done. Yeah.
So how could someone, so then I would ask the question, how can you say there's corruption or conflicts of interest if these formulas have to be followed? And how could someone manipulate those formulas if it's out in the public eye? I mean, here's a building, here's the income of the building, here's the income of the building, here's the shape of the building, here's the shape of the building, compare it to this, and this. I mean, it's...
David,
Yes.
I think a really good person to talk to about this would be Councilor DeSorger, because she's been doing a lot of research on how a 3-bedroom house on such and such street is assessed at this, and a 3-bedroom house on this other street who's owned by this person is assessed at a different price. She has so much information. She will talk your ear off about it.
Okay. I hear that.
Okay.
But it may be that that's wrong, and therefore someone who's already in a position of watchdogging can go in and say, whoa, we have evidence that you're not following this set of rules. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, there is a system in place, okay, but it relies heavily on people going out and doing the work. Now, that in and of itself human nature can, as you well know, cause conflicts to happen. The part of what has not happened in a long time is that my understanding of it, every 3 years, the city used to get assessed. This is state stuff. Now it's up to every 5 years that the city has to conduct an assessment. So there's a longer period of time in between those things. People that go out in the field, that look at property and everything else, are supposed to fill out certain things on cards that get reported. Like if you put, $20,000 worth of windows in your house, then that would be a 20 grand upgrade. If that doesn't make it to a reporting card, then there's no way for anybody to know what happened to your property and whether or not your property should be revalued because of that. The other piece I want to talk about, again, it just gets back to the human element, and it also has to deal with the fact that I want to pick up on what Sheila was talking about with counselors not being allowed to do certain things. Nobody in the town who works for the government is supposed to accept any kind of gift or remuneration or award. Thank you. It's not, the language is not coming tonight, or award or anything like that from any other people. And there was a time going back, and this is going back almost 20 years now, where there was some conflict because somebody in that office was looking to accept Red Sox tickets, and that's a no-no. You can't do it. So the issue is that if my mom lives on this street and she put in a swimming pool in her backyard, and I was the assessor and I wanted to give her a break, I wouldn't report her swimming pool. I wouldn't put it on her card. There would appear nowhere in a database, which is reliant on people being honest and doing their work. So even though there's a system in place, there's been so many personnel cuts in that office and everything else. I am saying all of this not because it has anything to do with the charter, but because I hope it answers this question of how does corruption happen and who do we report to, and does the state audit us on a regular basis? And at this point, a lot of these things fall into the no, they do not category. So that's I don't know how the language can change, but I know that we have to do something because we're serving people here, and it has to be an even playing field, especially when the town receives revenue that it desperately needs in order to provide services for people. But if not all assessments are current, if there's information missing, if some buildings are assessed and others are not, we are not collecting the revenue that this town desperately needs in order to be up there, in order to do projects like the vote that's facing us in 2 weeks. We need to know our revenue stream from our local authority is solid and good. How do we do that? I don't know, but that's okay. I'm going to be quiet now.
Go ahead, Erin.
I was just wondering if when it does it have to be elected by the voters, or could the positions be elected by the council?
Wow.
Good question.
Well,
That would be a sea change for a lot of different things, but that's a good question. John, go ahead.
I think it says in section 24 that as nearly as 1/3 of their number as may be shall be elected or appointed annually. So she's right. It certainly could happen that way. I just want to make the point we're talking about. You can apply algorithms, pardon me, all you want, and if your inputs are wrong and the data's wrong, you're not going to get good numbers. I want to make a point sort of to that is more in section C, Unless otherwise provided by law, the assessor appointed by the mayor shall be a full-time employee of the town and entitled to all the benefits occasioned thereby. There is an exam that you have to take. There is a course you have to take and a training you have to take.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
an exam you have to pass. And I wonder if that shouldn't be in there too. Because if we're addressing the whole issue of how rigorous people who actually run this department should be, I think it ought to be in the baseline document that you have to have qualified for that. I don't know if the acting assessor did or didn't. Maybe they did, but if it isn't there and it isn't in section 24 that Aaron just put up for us, it should be mentioned somewhere that at the very least, the chief assessor meets all the requirements of state law.
Hold it, Chris. Go ahead, Otis.
It's in the administrative code of the state, so it's it's one of the CMRs, and all of the assessors do need to pass their qualifications.
So here's a question. In many other arenas, the state sets a baseline, which Aaron showed us with that particular section of the law. What's to stop the council from saying, in spite of the fact that there's assessments that the state requires assessments every 5 years, we will change our assessments every 3 years, or we will do this, or we will do that. You see, I think you're in what you all have to think about on the council side, I think, is you probably have the power to do all that, but it's going to cost the town money or the city money, because you're going to have to expand the employment base to get things done. If you're going to send stuff out and say, be honest about the swimming pool, you could say every 2 years, some person employed by the city will go to every property on these 25 streets and by law, walk around the back and see what you're doing. And if we find out that you're lying, then, you'll be fined or whatever. I mean, I actually think, taking the conflict of interest issue aside, which I think is more, I guess what I'm thinking about is, let's say we had the best group of assessors ever, and they were all people that you knew were doing the best job that they could. Is this city really set up properly to do the right job? Are there going to be more honest mistakes because of the fact that there's less people working in that office?
Yes.
We're depending on people to say honestly what's going on. Of course, they will not. People aren't giving a lot of time to their thinking about comparative properties, and on and on and on. And the fact that that is happening is why people in power can do what they do, because nobody's looking over their shoulder. And so there's a relaxation of policing, or there's a relaxation of really identifying on a day-to-day basis what's going on in that office. And it only comes up where you have this case where it's so bad. And everybody says, why is that so bad? And then you walk it back and you see that there's something wrong with the system. But it's not like the system isn't otherwise broken, because the assessments aren't being done right. So what I'm saying to you is, I wonder if the council can, through both legislation, and of course you'd have a struggle with the mayor to expand that portion of the budget, but that would be your political response to what I know your concerns are about this appropriation, and the fact that from looking into this, you have found these problems that you need to. Does home rule allow you to get stricter, is my question.
Okay, that's valid.
No. Does it allow you to be stricter? 5 years is like everybody has to do every 5 years. You can't do, you can't be so, if you want to be stingy, it's 5 years. But otherwise, maybe we should do it every 3 years, or we should group it into, the city should be divided into 5 sections or whatever, I'm beginning to think that while what Sheila was suggesting, the idea of putting in language, I really think that of qualifications, that's not where I think you have more power than you think in terms of solving this problem. And the problem and the power comes from both legislating and budgeting. that office needs a lot of help. And in the meantime, if we wanted to change the system, 1 elected rather than 2, or defined, I mean, the chief assessor is probably defined by statute, as Otis said, but if we wanted to change 1 elected rather than 2, that's a possibility. And that might, but I'm beginning to think from this discussion that it's really on you guys. And I don't mean it as a bad, I mean, it's really within your power.
So David, if that's what you think, I'd be happy to talk with you offline about how we can do something on the council side. If you're willing to talk to me about this at some point, probably after the holidays. But I think that it's still worth adding a sentence to the charter just so that it has a little bit of, it has some teeth, because ordinances can change, right? So let's say we've got this like huge problem with corruption, cronyism, and it's, my feeling is not that this is, coming from anybody's ill will. I think this is just, we all feel good when we can do favors for our friends. It makes us, relationships are so important to human beings, right? I don't think anyone is trying to hurt anybody. I think that people are trying to help each other and don't realize that they're doing it at the expense of others. So if we can put something in the charter to kind of just like remind people that this is a no-no and have that, I think that's good. And also have a legislative solution. Now, if we ever found out that this actually does come from some ill will, and this, these people are, working some sort of machine in the background, they could go and get a new town council elected. They could go do, if you want to get into this like sort of paranoid thinking, by having something in the charter, we at least have some teeth so that we can go after. If we do find that people are intentionally misleading the public or intentionally favoring one group over the rest. Does that make sense?
It does, but if you add language to the charter that says the council now has the power to do X, Y, Z, I don't think the mayor necessarily would approve that with you. She might, so that would be a negotiation.
Oh, I'm not
But
saying the
if you
council.
want
I'm saying if you wanted, I was saying, if you wanted to suggest some ordinance language to me and we could talk about it after the holidays, I'd be happy to put something like that forward on the city council. Because I know the ordinances are, sometimes that's the best way to deal with it. But I also would worry that, if you've got, 13 landlords in Greenfield who are all profiting from this, and they decide that they're all going to run for the city council and they're going to get rid of that ordinance in 3 years, that, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
I'm trying to make sure that we have a foolproof
I
system.
understand. You want something in the charter that will control, just like we have the when you leave the council, you can't work for the city. There should be, when you come in, there's certain eligibility issues that have to be that you want to see stated in the charter, so that that those persons under those circumstances, which we've yet to define, but we think we understand what they might be ineligible to run for office at that time.
And if we can keep it broad and then have an ordinance that's more detailed, but having something in there means there has to be an ordinance detailing it. I'm sorry if I'm unclear. I've got a
No, I understand what you mean. You're saying that it would be a general statement, and the ordinances would, from time to time, be more specific about the eligibility. Yes, Chris. Yes, Chris, I'm sorry.
Whoops. The problem is that we're talking about elected officials as opposed to appointed officials. So the law allows anybody who's anybody who's a citizen of the US, it makes no distinction on credentials or past history or anything like that. You can run for office. So how do you legislate that? And I don't know. I'm sort of moving toward Aaron's suggestion, that there is a bigger body other than, say, the mayor's authority. There's another authority at play that can nominate or elect an assessor.
But just remember, anybody who elects, they're both they're one political, and two, they're vulnerable to corruption. I mean, it doesn't matter where you put the place of the happening. So that's why what the codification does is it creates an outside wall that it creates it protects it provides a protection that nobody wanting to be corrupt can overcome, because that protection is built in there. So maybe, I mean, we've talked this out pretty well. I still think I'm with you, Sheila. I'm happy. We're going to loop back. So, oh, by the way, just as a total, don't let me forget, we're obviously not going to finish this by December 31st. Unless somebody thinks that I'm going to live and die by this every single day, because it's not going to happen. So we didn't get started till May. We didn't even get up to speed, all of us, until September. I think we're doing a hell of a job. And I forgot to ask the mayor, but I think she may, and there may have to be some formality about continuing our appointment into the year. I'm okay if we finish this at the end of January, that kind of a thing. But I know because we do have to loop back. We've raised a lot of issues, and I could see by the looks on everybody's faces, we're wearing each other out with this discussion. And so if we go back, it might be like the discussion wouldn't happen the same way. It would just be like, oh yeah, I get it now. Let's just do this, and then it would be like a 1 minute, go around. So I think this might
You
be.
hope.
Huh?
You hope.
Well, at the end of the day, I already see here recommendations. It means, again, I don't.
David, I'm sorry. It's been a long day.
It's okay. I'm fine. Lucky we're not in the same room together. All right. So the Board of Assessors, can we leave it for now? And Sheila, I'll be happy to talk to you. Anybody else? I mean, I'm not the end all about it, but I'm wondering if home rule gives you the ability to do more to legislate what happens in our community. And it just hasn't been thought about, because all we do, you're so busy and you don't really
Yeah.
get
So
out.
David, why don't I call Ginny DeStorger at some point and see what her ideas are? Because like I said, she's really the our city council expert on this issue right now.
Okay. Sure.
I'm happy to talk to her, and then we'll bring you in at some point and try and figure out what the legislative solution would be. And I would like to have a little sentence in the charter, just because we need to make this important enough that it warrants a sentence in the charter. But I'm happy to move on.
Well, I'll just end with this. I think everybody agrees that there could be a sentence, but the 7 of us don't know exactly what the sentence should say.
I'll agree with that.
So that, and I know that Alan has brought that up often, and Erin, that's easy to talk about it, but you really have to kind of ground yourself. What are you going to say? So it's good discussion and people can think about it. I mean, this is why it's a good group. All right. Town constables.
No, nothing.
Okay. Board of Health. Now, I've noticed that Glenn Ayers, God bless him, has been on this in our meetings for at least the last 3 or 4 times, either out of incredible interest for the charter as a whole, or because he wants to hear how we discuss his recommendations, or maybe for no other reason than he likes listening to us. But I just want to note that Glenn is at the meeting, and thank you, Glenn, for all that you do, and thank you for making the suggestion about the Board of Health changes.
Thank you. That's all I'll say.
Okay. Please don't reach out and ask for permission. I'm not going to guarantee you I'll give you permission, but I would not be happy if you just interrupted the meeting. Okay? Thank you.
I got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Chris, I have thoughts about it, but I wanted to start with you. Or anybody else has thoughts about it, I can go last. But has everybody seen and read Glenn's recommendations? Does anyone have thoughts about it? Chris, starting with you, do you have thoughts about it?
Well, the discussion we just had is not that far removed from what we're talking about here as well, in trying to empower people to be able to do their jobs without interference from from others that may not, from actually, I guess, from a mayor. Okay, when you get back to it, there have been there's some history pieces here that I'm sure everybody's aware of. The one thing that I kind of picked up from, and I may be interpreting this incorrectly, I don't know, but picked up from Glenn is that there has to be more teeth to the Board of Health and more protection for the employee whose job it is to go out and provide services to this community. So in that way, we're talking about, and you just mentioned about home rule charter, being able to put some teeth into what's going on. It also occurs to me that there needs to be there's a question of not only appointment but reporting pieces as well. Who does the employee or employees of the town of the city report back to when the mayor is the appointing authority? And there are some personnel issues involved in that as well. But generally speaking, I think that I think we have to address each of those things one by one, because there seems to be, again, this issue of, how many bosses do you have? That kind of thing in regard to enforcing the Mass General Law. So if I've not stated it correctly, please, anybody, Glenn included, jump in. But that's my overview of all of this.
Okay, as the chair, I'm not going to let Glenn speak first until the rest of the committee has spoken, only because of the process, Glenn, nothing personal. I'm glad you're here and listening. Anybody else have any comments about it before I have some thoughts? Okay. So I read Glenn's suggestions and I found myself kind of reading into the suggestions like that was, that's what I should be thinking about. But that's just one suggestion. He has a lot more experience than I do. But I was thinking about in general, and Chris brought it up, if you're going to have a mayor in charge of the city, you need that people that he or she appoints be able to be controlled by the mayor. You don't want to hire a Board of Health person who goes out of control and then can't be fired except by the Board of Health, which is an appointed group, and it creates a big barrier between the mayor and the health director, who's the day-to-day person running around doing the good work. I do understand, and I don't have experience with it, so I'm speaking just as a lawyer writing legislation. I'm not speaking as a day-to-day person. So there could be some better way to do this. I guess I just can't immediately buy into the fact that the health director does not report back to the mayor. So that piece I have to isolate because I just can't see that. But you want to build in safeguards around how the health director can act. If you want to build safeguards in around how the Board of Health has the right to do its job if there are health issues or health emergencies without interference, then, but it refers back to Mass General laws. And Aaron, I looked up chapter 111, sections 26 to 32. And I know that Glenn referred to a section. I read it. I really read it differently, Glenn, than you did. I see that as an agent of the Board of Health, not as the health director. Kind of like these boards of health have people who are professionals that they have to hire to come in. I'm sure, again, you have much more experience than I do. And this isn't about a health director. And do we have a health director in Greenfield, by the way?
An interim.
Right. So the problems that have arisen with that position, have they arisen because of the bad way that Mass General laws are set up ultimately? and that Glenn might be onto something, that there needs to be a buffer with the Board of Health protecting the health director from, from the vagaries of a highly politically motivated executive. I mean, I don't know how, I can't imagine how that would work in a system that initially thinks that you elected a mayor to be able to appoint his or her own people to promote his or her agenda as the elected executive. More you can put things in to prevent corruption, but if you're blocking the good mayor from doing his or her work, how's that, I don't know if that solves the problem of a one-time situation where people were treated badly. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, part of this is perhaps can be addressed by employment practice and contract, because it does say in the charter that the mayor has the right to terminate anybody and does not have to show just cause or they can terminate. They can just say, sorry, your service is no longer needed, go. My question actually goes to the fact that we do have department heads, what I would refer to as senior staff, who are, say, like running their own departments, like John, for instance, and also, Marlo with DPW. These, what I call independents or senior staff, have their own contracts with the mayor, and their terms are spelt out within their own contracts. Then there is a second tier of salaried employees, and they are represented by the SSEA. Now, if you're represented by the SSEA, there is some protection afforded you within their contract. So termination has to be for just cause, and it has to be you have to be able to prove in labor law or in labor court that this person's performance was, less. So my question is, I don't know which is which at this point. I don't know if Jennifer serves at the pleasure of the mayor as an independent or if she's in a union. But this idea that people can be fired and everything else might be the piece we want to focus on. I don't want to take any power away from the mayor. It's critical that the mayor have her own staff, but I wonder if some of this couldn't be addressed through the internal workings of a contract.
Okay, John.
So actually, you, Chris, brought up my position. To me, there is a difference because the position of a director of an MLP is really specifically listed as independent of the town, and there's a whole ton of case law, and it's really, really spelled out clearly, much more explicitly than Section 30 is here. So, and there was a direct intent that you can go back and point to that says an MLP, they were intended to be set up as businesses. There was a recognition that in competitive fields, they couldn't fall under the normal operations of a municipality. I have not, I've read through some of it, but I have not seen that for a director of health. So I think it is a little bit different. And I think that when you look at, and it says they can appoint agents or directors of public health, I don't think that's the same thing as appointing the director of the health department. I think that that is something that the mayor does, right? And it isn't specific in the same way that MLP law is about it. And there isn't case law that I know of that says that the board, the director of the health department is completely independent and reports only to the board. So I actually think there are two different things. I think the Board of Health does fall. I agree with you, Chris. In that case, I think it is something that is appointed by the mayor. That's how the town has operated for quite a while. And my experience in an MLP just makes me look at general government and see how odd the case of an MLP is, because the intent usually is to give the mayor the authority to appoint a director of a department. And a director of public health in section 30, I'm, David, you're the lawyer, I'm not, but I don't necessarily read that as being exactly the same as the director of the health department.
No, I read 30 as just saying that the Board of Health can appoint agents,
Yeah.
and those agents report back to the Board of Health. That's not, there's a separate section, there's a separate part of the statute, the sections I cited, that talk about the mayor appointing a commissioner, which I would say is the director of health in our city, and that person works under the mayor. So if nobody else has any comments, Glenn, I'd like to hear you, if you wish, say something about this. It's late, so I'd give you maybe 5 minutes, if that's enough time, because you've already put, I know you weren't at the, or if you were at the public hearing, but I know it's important to you, and you're acting in good faith here, so what do you have to say?
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed the public hearing. I couldn't attend that. First, I'm going to say the most important thing to me is that the charter create the health department, because right now the health department does not exist, except in an ordinance that was passed in 2016 for plastic bags. That's the first time that the health department is mentioned anywhere in the charter or the ordinances. So as of today, in accordance with the charter, the health department does not exist. And that needs to be fixed. There needs to be a health department in Greenfield. And as far as this discussion about Chapter 111, Section 30, the charter is correct in specifying that the Board of Health shall be subject to all of the rules, the Massachusetts general laws, because boards of health have a completely separate level of authority and power in the Commonwealth. Unlike any other board, the Board of Health is equivalent to the state legislature in the ability to enact laws that only apply to the town. But that, they're essentially equivalent to the city council in that way, that they can create ordinances. And that's a 3-member Board of Health that can create law. And that has been upheld numerous times by case law, by the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts. That
It disappeared.
Glenn?
that's
You
my
disappeared.
GSEC connection.
Would you repeat?
I just upped my bandwidth.
I have the same problem.
I just doubled my bandwidth and I still get frozen. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court has determined through numerous case laws that this is a special entity, the Board of Health. A 3-person board can create law. It only applies to the town or the city, but that is unlike any other entity besides town meeting or the state legislature.
But our charter already says that. So
it does, but it says follow the Mass law. Mass law says that the Board of Health shall appoint directors and health agents. And this is the problem that we have had in Greenfield, is that the Board of Health, and I have been involved in this, the Board of Health has been sidelined throughout the process, and the mayor has appointed the staff. The mayor has no authority under Mass General Law to appoint health agents or directors. And so in Greenfield, those directors are acting without proper authority unless the Board of Health appoints them. The director, the health director, and the health agents have no authority of themselves. Even their credentials do not give them authority. The only authority they have comes through the Board of Health, because the Board of Health has the power to do that.
Okay.
They have the power.
Okay.
So we need to create a department, and then the Board of Health has the authority to appoint people to that, and those people obviously should report to the appointing authority. Now, I agree that the Board of Health is needs to report to the mayor, but those members of the Board of Health by statute can only be removed from the Board of Health for cause. And that's in Mass General Law as well.
Go ahead, John.
So, Glenn, are you saying that your reading of the law is that these are people whose duties and powers are defined by state legislature and not by municipalities?
Yes, that's what our charter says. It says they shall follow the laws commonly followed, from the legislature.
And those laws specifically say that their powers and duties are created by state legislature. I
Yes.
haven't read enough for all of them. Well,
Yeah.
that's exactly like an MLP. And the case law does say that local municipalities have no authority over any agents whose jobs are specifically defined by the legislature.
No. The sentence has another part to it. It says all
Okay.
powers provided by the general laws and whatever powers are granted to it by the town council.
And that's an important distinction as well, because that excludes the mayor and says that the city council, the town council, may direct the Board of Health, but not the mayor. And that was the case with the plastic ordinance, that the city council passed that ordinance and specified the Board of Health. They gave direction to the Board of Health and the ability to enforce that ordinance. But again, the mayor has no direct relationship to the Board of Health except for the appointment of those members for staggered terms.
But the statute, I don't. All right, so that's fine. But the statute also says that a health director can be appointed by the mayor or health commissioner. So what powers would that person have?
Well, if we did have a health commission, we don't. Springfield does. You no longer have a Board of Health. The health commission replaces the Board of Health.
Okay.
And a commissioner is a different entity than a director. And that's a different law. So that's something that I believe that legislation would actually have to be passed to create a health commission. The state legislature would create that in the city. So Boston has a health commission. Springfield has a health commission. It's a completely different animal. We're talking about a Board of Health here.
I understand. Okay, gotcha. Go ahead, Erin.
My question about that is, though, that if you look at 26, section 26, B, B, C, D, E, it almost sounds that if you create a department of health, not a commission, that if you create a department of health, that gets rid of the Board of Health. Not a commission for public health, like 26E. So I'm confused by that, because it looks to me in this 111.26 that if you create a department of health, you get rid of a Board of Health. I don't see anything about a commission of health other than calling somebody appointed by the mayor a commissioner.
Yeah. So the first thing I said was that we have no health department in Greenfield. The charter has not created it. But you're talking about creating a health department and replacing the Board of Health. But right now we have a Board of Health. The charter creates the Board of Health or specifies who gets appointed to it. The charter does not create a health department. So we do not have any of the authority with the mayor's office for appointment or anything else to the health department, because basically the health department doesn't exist. There's nowhere where it exists. It's not created by the charter.
So let me take, so if in essence, the mayor has no authority under the charter to determine anything other than the appointments of the Board of Health. And from there, the statutory language provides them with the power to deal with all the underlying health officials that would be managing the day-to-day operations.
I believe that that's true, except for the proviso that the mayor does control town council and controls the Board of Health's access to town council. And that is often a point of contention in many towns and cities. And also the mayor and the city council controls the budget, and that also controls the Board of Health, or, the health department, if you want to call that health department. But again, it doesn't exist in Greenfield.
Okay, I see. Okay, so I see what you're saying, that we're not following the rules we set up. Except to the extent that there might be some the political room of the city council getting involved is how we overcome the fact that we're not exactly conforming with the rules as you think of them. But I think Erin's question is a good one. So if you're advocating for us to create a health department, then you would have a hierarchy that would be different than it is now, right? And it would be controlled by the mayor. Go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
The town would have to vote to accept 26A through E. There would have to be a vote that was taken by the council and approved by the mayor to replace the Board of Health with a commission. So to create a health department, you have to get rid of the Board of Health. That's what it says it says 26A, a city, by accepting the provisions of this section and sections 26B to 26E inclusive, by vote of the city council and approval of the mayor, may create a health department to replace the Board of Health therein. Such health department shall consist of a commissioner of health who shall perform and exercise the duties and powers of a Board of Health with the advice of an advisory council of health. So you have to accept 26A through E inclusive to replace the Board of Health if you want to create a commission that then can create a health department. It doesn't look to me like you can create a Board of Health, a health department under a Board of Health. You have to get rid of the Board of Health to do it.
Okay, so what would the hierarchy be under? What's the? I wonder what the vote is. Maybe if it doesn't say a supermajority, it would be a 7 to be a majority.
It doesn't say.
Okay, so what would it look like if we had a health department? How would that run? How would the mayor then does what? Appoints
a commissioner, and the commissioner would have to be a doctor or someone who's very highly qualified, much beyond what our current health director would be qualified for. It's unusual to have that level of authority. Health commissions are not the norm in Massachusetts.
Right.
I know Boston has one and Springfield has one. I don't know of other cities that have health commissioners.
So you're saying two things. One I get, one I don't get. The one I get is that you think that the way the charter is written and the way the general laws are written, that our community needs to better understand how that works, because it seems like the executive branch asserts more control over the health department, over the Board of Health than is statutorily allowed.
The previous administration certainly. I don't have any problems with how
even
things
if it
are
was
now.
a benevolent, even if it was a kind mayor, it sounds like your interpretation is that the mayor, once appointing the Board of Health members, kind of loses control over what happens next. But then you say that we should create a health department, but yet you don't feel comfortable with it. And this is the last thing I'm gonna ask you, and I'm gonna go back to the group. Isn't that, I don't understand that. You're asking us to create a health department, but yet it doesn't seem like something that you would.
No, I wasn't asking to create a health department. I was pointing out that the health department does not exist. It's not created by the charter. It's a fiction. It exists. It has a web page. It's called a health department in Greenfield, but it actually, like all the other departments in Greenfield, they're all created by the charter. And the health department is not mentioned in the charter. It is first mentioned in an ordinance from 2016. So that's the reality. I think that we should create a firewall, a clearly defined firewall, so that the abuse of the past cannot happen again under, another tyrant, basically.
Well, I don't know what more I see. The town council has some powers, and you're suggesting that, so that's below what we have now. So if we left the charter the way it was, it sounds like you would be satisfied, and then your next level of lobbying would be to talk to the city council to create ordinances that would be more protective of the way the state law you think should be controlled. Is that fair to say? I just understand what you're saying. I'm not advocating for one way or the other.
No, yes, I think I think that's true. I think that the charter as written is fine. I think it just needs to be clearer, specified who the health director replies or responds to, or is responsible to. And I think the health director should be responsible to the entity that appoints them, which is the Board of Health. And in the previous example, the administration hired and fired the health director without input from the Board of Health, and I was involved in the process. And I was appointed by the Board of Health to work to try to rebuild the health department in Greenfield, and then the mayor fired me without any authority to do so. It just created so much confusion and chaos, but that was the way things were. I think it just needs to be clearer. There are specific sections. It's, for instance, in section 3-4 or 3-5, where it says that personnel, directly report, department heads directly report to the mayor. Well, I think there should be an inclusion in there that says, with the exception of the health director, who reports to the Board of Health. And I think that just needs to be clear, because otherwise it's open to abuse. And that's what happened in the past. As you know, every single person in the board that worked for the health department quit or was driven out, And that was an embarrassment across the entire state. And there's no reason to allow that.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.
David, I have a question.
Yes. No, thank you very much. I got a much better impression of what your concerns were by listening to you than by reading your email. So now I understand what you're saying. It's been very educational, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure the committee appreciates it as well. Thank you for continuing to attend these meetings in order to be given an opportunity to express more clearly what you were saying. And we appreciate it. And I think and now we have to think about what you're saying. But Sheila, go ahead.
Yeah, so this wouldn't be completely unique in Greenfield. I mean, the school superintendent is appointed by the school committee, not by the mayor. So we do have some sort of a template to go by, but also this idea, you mentioned Just Cause earlier, and I got to say, like, my union is running me ragged right now. And yeah, we have Just Cause, but I've got to say it's not the silver bullet that people might think it is. It does get abused, but it might be nice to see Just Cause for our department heads. You shouldn't just get a job because, I know people like to say at the pleasure of the mayor, but we wouldn't want someone to come in and just like bring in all their, their buddies, their cousin, their brother-in-law, right? I think Just Cause for some of these higher level positions might be even more important because these are such crucial roles, right?
Yeah.
But that's my thought.
Okay. Well, I hear that I'm like a little bit like I don't even know what to say about it. Usually that's unusual. So why don't we think about this as well? Unless anybody has, we've been having so much fun, by the way, that we've been doing this for 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I bet nobody's even looked at their clock except me, because I'm in charge, because we've been having such a great time. So, and we're still on section 6, by the way. But anyway, anybody have any, are we a little ready to go get some eggnog and rum, and not necessarily in that order?
Yeah, getting tired and hungry.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot more. Okay, listen, we're doing a good job. That's what the mayor charges us to do. So anybody have anything else to say on this? Glenn, we've heard you. Go ahead.
I'll just say I do hear what Glenn's saying, and obviously I was on council for it, so I experienced it. And my questions going forward, I guess, for us are around the specifics. I'm still a little unclear on whether what Mass General Law does and does not allow, and I'm also a little unclear about whether, I mean, I think that there are departments in the city that are not ensconced in the charter or the code. I'm not sure the building department is, for example. And I guess I would just want us to return to that question about, do they necessarily all need to be enumerated by the charter and by the code? Just something I haven't really thought about yet.
Okay. So you want to call it a day, a night, a late night, early
I
morning?
move that we call it a day.
Okay.
I second.
Chris, you're going to have to continue this. We're still on section 6.
I'm just gonna go drink eggnog right now, that's all.
Don't even think about what you have to do next meeting. All right.
Okay.
When do we want to meet again? If we're going to keep on the schedule, the wonderful schedule that we're on, gathering every 2 weeks or so, December 21st would be the next meeting. If you want, after that, I would say into January. So is the 21st okay to keep moving? Do we like that? Or Aaron, I know I have the chat box is over your finger, Aaron. I don't know if you're saying, wait a minute, or you're saying thumbs up.
That's okay, yeah.
Thumbs up the 21st at 5:30. This is a love fest. God. All right. 5:30. Excellent job. Where's my, all right, motion. I'm not even going to, can I hear a motion to adjourn in a second?
So moved, Wheeler.
Second, Gilmore.
Okay. All in favor, put their thumbs up.
Aye.
Aye.
Alan, put your thumb up. I can't see it. Sheila, you're putting your thumb up?
I sure am.
All right. Anyone disagree? All right. See you the 21st. Good job.